Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karl Wojtkun. I am the chairperson for the JMU Federal Dukes Alumni Association. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar this afternoon. I'd like to lead off just really quick with a couple admin notes here, introduce you to our topic, and do a quick commercial before I hand it over to our host here at Winvale to bring us into our topic today of federal contracting and Flux. Note number one, if you haven't already noticed, you should be muted, but if not, go ahead and click that mute button so it doesn't disturb the rest of the briefing. We will be utilizing the Q&A box today. So the Q&A box is active. We will do a Q&A session at the end. So by all means, plop those questions in there as you see them. We'll be monitoring them then. And then at the end of this session here, we'll try our best to answer all the questions that we have in the Q&A. Also, as a reminder, everyone can see this. It's a publicly recorded event. So keep your questions appropriate and let's have a great event today. Next slide, please. If you're here for federal contracting and Flux, you're in the right place. Once again, welcome. My name is Karl Wojtkun, JMU Federal Dukes Alumni Association. If you're not here for this event, let me know how you got here, because that'll be kind of funny how you got here, and I'd like to figure that out. So with that, I promise two quick 30-second commercials for the JMU Federal Dukes before we go on to our speakers today. Next slide, please. JMU Federal Dukes is an alumni association that actually really has a really awesome vision, one that I'm really proud to support. And that vision, in essence, is to get our alumni, our faculty, our students, and the federal contracting community into some sort of synergy. And the reason why we're doing this is to build value to JMU. It's to make it so we lead our students, our faculty, our university, and those that are associated with us in the federal marketplace. We help with applied research, and it makes JMU a differentiator for those who are seeking to apply to JMU, utilize JMU services, or just promote JMU in general. Next slide, please. So one of the ways we do this is increasing events or increasing awareness through events like this, preparing future employees through informational webinars and building pathways. By all means, you can look at the participants list here and you can see a laundry list of people who are in your community. We encourage you to reach out to them. At the end of this, we'll promote our email addresses and our ways to contact us so that we can bring you into our community if you aren't aware of us already, or if you'd like to promote us to other people within your community, build those pathways to help that synergy between students, alumni, and the university. And I have a team here that does that with me. Next slide, please. That's the JMU leadership team. If you look at that, this is a really awesome display of JMU's power. Not only with the guest speaker who I'm about to introduce that we have today with Winvale, but when you look at this very powerful team here in the DC area, it's almost a list of who's who. And I'm really proud to be part of this team and bring you webinars like this today. And I hope it's something of value to you. If you have anything that you also want to see, just my quick ask is that you hit me up on email, hit me up through the JMU Federal Dukes Association, and we'll work hard to try to bring those topics to you. But without further ado, I would like to introduce, next slide, please, Federal Contracting and Flux, presented by Winvale, a company that I've had the pleasure to work with over the last couple months and work for. I'd also like to introduce you to Brian Dunn, who is the CEO of Winvale. Brian started Winvale back in 2003 and quickly grew them into one of the biggest government contracting consulting firms that specializes in the GSA schedule. In addition to helping with his own clients, Winvale also sells technology solutions to the public sector. And they're also a big supporter of veterans like myself. And personally, Brian, I'd like to thank you for that and bringing me on your team very readily and supporting fellow veterans like myself. With that, thank you, heartfelt thank you. I'd like to turn it over to Brian for our incredible list of awesome topics here. Brian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Karl. I hope we have some more veterans joining us today. I know May is Military Appreciation Month. It's always a good time just to take some moments and honor our service members and our veterans and their families. We've got Memorial Day coming up, so it's a great time of the year to do that. I just want to thank you, everybody, who's joined us today to take their lunch break and to kind of get caught up on all the changes that are happening in the federal market. I don't know if anybody on the webinar today can guess how many executive orders President Trump has signed to date. I'll give you a second to think about that. Bonus points to anybody who had 152. 152 executive orders in less than 4 months. So that's contracting in flux. That's whiplash. That is why we are here today. So to get caught up on a few subjects, it's a lot to try to cover in an hour. We have less than an hour, so we're going to try and cover up what are some of the important topics that I see in the world of federal contracting. So we're going to tackle how GSA is going to quadruple in size. We're going to tackle how the changes to some of the big GSA and the big BIC contracts, those big GWACs, what changes are happening there. We're going to talk a little bit tech, FedRAMP and CMMC. We're going to talk about what DOGE is doing and how we can respond, some of the canceled contracts that are happening. We're going to talk about the innovation programs at DoD. This is a great little sneaky program that they've got that some of us can kind of tap into, help normalize some of the federal contract revenue that we may be missing. We're also going to talk about small business set-aside changes, if any. There's a lot of anxiety about if Trump is going to follow DEI and start to curb changes to the small women-owned, small veteran-owned set-asides that affect a lot of us. And then finally, Karl is going to take NATO. We are here to talk about government contracting, but there is a lot of spending activity, a lot of stuff happening abroad that the U.S. has a fair amount of influence around, but we should all kind of keep an eye on. All right, so our first topic, how GSA is going to quadruple in size. We have seen, a lot of changes happening. People saw, U.S. aid and education really get trimmed. We have some winners in some of the changes that are happening, and GSA is certainly among those winners. President Trump issued Executive Order 14240 a couple of months ago, and this was a big step in the government's attempt yet again to streamline procurement, streamline acquisition, eliminate some redundant spending, and get better margin, get better pricing on what they're buying. This is an effort to take procurement activities in a lot of different agencies and departments and to try to consolidate it to GSA. And some of us know GSA, but why GSA? Well, GSA's mission is to deliver the best value in acquisition to the government. And so, yes, they also deal with real estate. They're the landlord of the government. They've got the keys to the White House. They also do some technology procurements, but acquisition, really, they're the acquisition arm of the government and have been for quite a long time. So, we're talking about the government spends just short of $500 billion on commercial kind of goods and services every year. They are looking if they can just reduce the spending 10% for savings. I mean, we're talking about $50 billion that they can do in an effort to centralize procurement. And that's a very bipartisan issue. Who doesn't want the government to save money and not have to spend all that in a wasteful manner? So we saw a quote from the head of GSA's acquisition service. They know what's happening. They are right now feverishly trying to recruit contracting officers to GSA. So they know that they are going to get significantly bigger over the next 3-4 years. And I also want to take a moment and remind everybody, what we have is we've got this sort of new culture in government procurement. Remember, President Trump issued an executive order to help deregulate the government. They've got that 10-to-1 deregulation initiative. So, which means that whenever an agency wants to propose a new rule or guidance, they need to show how, 9, 10 other rules are going to get deregulated or repealed. So, it's really changing how the government is buying and who's doing that. So it's a new culture. I don't know if we've seen, but, they are proposing a new rewrite to the FAR 2.0. And much like the tax law, I mean, this is something that's been talked about for a long time. It has swelled. It has gotten bigger over the years. They keep adding to things. I think it's a good idea to kind of make things a little more simple. We're not going to get into the FAR rewrite today, but that is going to be coming down the pipe, and that might change most of the webinar that we're talking about today and how the government buys. So we're going to see. In addition, one of the things that GSA they are pushing right now is this one gov strategy. Now, many of us have seen the government take positions on, when the government buys Microsoft and Google and these kind of enterprise-wide technology deployments, they're trying to negotiate some of those big user licenses on a higher level. Well, this one gov strategy is kind of formalizing that a little bit more. They already have Microsoft and Google agreed under this new program, but what I want people today to understand is that one gov strategy is going to lean now into IT hardware, platforms, infrastructure, cybersecurity. That's going to be coming up. And the government, they've been ingesting procurement data better past 10 years. I think they're going to see what the government's been buying on a large volume scale and get better at negotiating with those manufacturers. So if you are one of those companies, look into one gov strategy, start developing some relationships, and get ahead of that. Next thing we're going to talk about best-in-class contracts. Many of us on the webinar today, we understand that there are sort of preferred contracts that the government uses, that are allocated billions of dollars. BIC contracts, these that you see on the screen, 8A Stars, Alliant, CIO-SP4, Oasis, VETS2. These are called Tier 3 contract vehicles. And Tier 3 is a label by OMB that sets aside, these are the best contracts that the government should be using. There are Tier 2 and Tier 1. But what we're seeing is with DOGE oversight and DOGE cuts, the government is going to be smarter about how they spend the money and what contracts that they're using. It's all about saving taxpayer money. So, which is right now why we're seeing GSA pulling these contracting officers from NASA. Right, NASA's administering SOUP. NIH, they're administering CIO-SP4. So we're going to see these BIC contracts. We're also going to see the GSA schedule program, I believe, grow. GSA, the schedules program did $51 billion last year. That's a lot of money. There's a lot of contractors there. And again, even with the budget cuts and the DOGE pressure, we expect all those buyers, there's going to be a fair amount of political pressure for these federal buyers to come into the schedules program and all these BIC contracts to use more of these Tier 2, Tier 3 for procurement. So something to keep an eye on. Again, what we're seeing is GSA right now, they are struggling. They're going to be expected to do a lot more with a lot less. Their timelines, especially, we do a lot with the GSA schedules program. Their timelines have doubled, if not tripled, for things like new offers, for things like modifications. Right now is a great time to make mods to your contract before year end, but that process might take a month. It's now taking 2-3 months. So you really want to stay ahead of timelines, especially if you're looking for Q4 opportunities to make some updates to your pricing. And then lastly, Cody. So again, the government and GSA, they are trying to do more with less. How are they going to do that? Well, they're tapping into a new AI tool that they've got. So Cody is basically helping contracting officers within the government with a lot of their pre-award qualification requirements that they have. And we know, part of what COs have to do, especially the ones with the warrants, they have to go and they have to make a responsibility determination. They have to look at things like CPARs and past performance. Do you have a SAM registration? Do you have NAICS code in that SAM registration? So that process, which was largely manual, where they have to go to all these different government websites, this new tool, Cody, is helping to streamline that and cut that down in terms of time. So the code for Cody is being shared by GSA. It's being shared to other agencies and departments. There is YouTube training online now for Cody. So my big takeaway, which is including this in this slide, is making sure all of us as contractors, we know what our profiles are on these websites, making sure we understand SAM and how we look on fpds.gov. And that way, so that we can get ahead of any changes or any administrative errors. We see contracting officers all the time, fat finger, contract actions when they're entering into the government website. So making sure that's all accurate is going to help streamline things a lot more. All right. I mentioned, we have this sort of anxiety right now as contractors. We've got whiplash. I kind of feel like the government contract market is similar to one of those HD TV shows that we all watch about house renovations. Those are kind of cool in 30 minutes, but I feel like the government is going through like procurement renovation. That's a pretty good show to watch. So, continuing along the trend of renovations, we've got FedRAMP 20X, and this is for some of the audience that understands cloud and why FedRAMP is important. This is one of those platforms to ensure that cloud providers are adhering to some very strict cybersecurity standards before the government can buy from them. Many of my clients will use AWS or FedRAMP data center to host their SaaS or their code, especially when selling to the federal government. So what the federal government has really seen is kind of a lackluster, passive, almost laissez-faire kind of reaction to FedRAMP. They don't want to spend the money on their own. They don't want to move their code. The current requirements takes the IT security officer at the company way too long to understand what happens, like, all these different requirements and regulations and checklists. So what FedRAMP and GSA are doing right now is they have established these community working groups. They include Google, they include some of the thought leadership and great technology companies out there, but they also include smaller stakeholders, and all of them together are trying to streamline FedRAMP accreditation. So again, what we're trying to do is they're trying to automate 80% of the program security requirements. The old FedRAMP program, which is still in place, there are a lot of sort of written explanations. So instead of annual assessments and a formal manual type process in some respects, there's going to be a lot of automated checks just to get most of the FedRAMP checks done. And that's a good thing. So any of us who still deal with FedRAMP, this is coming down the road. If you're still working FedRAMP, don't stop yet. The traditional Rev 5 version is still the one that's active. But GSA, they are expecting to announce a formal end of life timeline for 5 and move to 20X. It might be this calendar year. We'll see. We know how fast the government can move sometimes, but this is something that's very important that's going to help, hopefully, for all of us with have SaaS, get accredited that much faster and can respond in a better, more secure environment for what the government needs. Okay, CMMC. For us in the government contracting world, I feel like we've been force-fed CMMC the last 5 years. I actually researched, and CMMC 1 came out September of 2020. So we're going on 5 years. Some of us are triggered a little bit and have some anxiety, or some of us just have we don't have the patience anymore. But CMMC, again, it is one of those programs that covers what's called the defense industrial base. So any contractor or subcontractor that works with the DoD. So we're talking 60,000 plus companies. And again, a very bipartisan issue is cybersecurity. And the DoD and the buyers, they want to make sure that contractors like us, we're protecting the federal contract information, the CUI. It may get extended beyond that, but we want to make sure that we have an adequate level of defense around IT security, because we know foreign nation states, rogue, and there's a lot of people who try to break into the government by way of contractors. So there are 3 certifications, and just to kind of give everybody an update about what's going on with CMMC, it is an official rule. It is here, and it's not going away. So, there are now 3 levels of certification. Level 1 is a self-certification. Level 2 requires a third-party assessment, I think every 3 years. And level 3 is the highest one. That includes the DoD assessment every 3 years. That's the one where you've got serious FCI and CUI on your contracts. So, again, this is something that we do not want to wait for. I think many of us can get started on this. Level 1 self-certifications, go through that, get ready. And also, educate your subs. We all have teaming relationships and partners as we go to market. Those subs, those teaming partners, they're going to be coming along with us. They also need to have the same certification, if not more, than us. So although it's not an official rule, the DFARS is going to get revised through I think it's a 48 CFR rule change. There is rumor that that's going on right now, and that bids this fiscal year. I don't know if I agree with that, but bids this fiscal year are going to start to have the CMMC clause in it. So again, you don't want to be missing an opportunity when you don't have that level 1 yet done and your competitor does. Okay, so as we talked about, DOGE has been, creating a lot of headlines the past couple of months. I mean, have they been largely political? Maybe, but they've been canceling a lot of contracts for convenience. We don't see a lot of contracts that they've been canceling for cause. I don't, they're not the buyer. They don't know what is, not happening on that contract that should have. So, we've seen in the law that the U.S. government is sovereign and they can exit a contract for any reason. That doesn't mean that we don't have rights. We need to understand first why you're canceling the contract. And again, termination for convenience is the most common way that they are getting out of these contracts. So for those of us who are familiar, it really gets down into the settlement agreement. I've got some FAR clauses here that you want to know. But if the government says, hey, I know we signed up to have a 5-year period of performance, but I want out after 3 years, us as a contractor, we are staffing that contract, that project, more than just billable people. We were staffing that for 5 years. We were hiring people. There's a fair amount of costs that we're going to incur just to get out of that contract. So that settlement agreement, which we rarely see a contracting officer rebut or come back on, my encouragement is stuff your dollars with as much as you can that are reasonable, that you can have a defensible position to explain, but put all your dollars in that settlement agreement that you think, and a little bit more that think are reasonable, that's going to cause the expense coming out of that contract. And of course, seek professional guidance. If you've got a large contract that they're getting out of, there's a lot of money on the table. Get professional guidance before you submit that settlement agreement. Otherwise, it's you kind of miss your opportunity. Termination for causes, that's a very different issue. This is when the government has an issue with the contractor's failure to meet your obligations under the contract. We know that they first issue a show cause or a cure notice talking about what the deficiencies are and how you're going to address those. They are very serious because what many people don't realize is that the government's remedy, if they end up terminating for cause, they're going to want to acquire another contractor. They're going to want to acquire similar items. And they're going to charge the defaulted contractor with any excess, like reprocurement costs. It's almost like they're going to put together their own settlement agreement. So, we don't want to not just, have a contract canceled for cause, but also an invoice showing here's the government's expense and time now for just shifting the work to another contractor. So again, sometimes for cause, you can hire an attorney and really sort of argue the position, because sometimes it's the government's fault, but we don't ever want that to happen. So again, convenience, cause, they're closely, but they're very, very different issues. Okay. So again, what we've got some recent changes in procurements and budgets. It's happening. Right now is a good time to think, take a step back, reconsider partnerships, repivot our brand as a federal contractor. Here at Winvale, we are always preaching, what is your federal brand? It's going to be different than your commercial brand. Now is a good time to look at alternative paths to markets, revenue sources and partnerships. And, I'm going to highlight a few at the DoD because they've got some really great programs. We talked about earlier in the webinar that if there's a winner in some of these budget changes, it's GSA. DoD, I would consider another winner in some of this. They are somewhat firewalled from a lot of those large budget cuts. So the DoD, they've got some of these really great innovative type programs that they are soliciting solutions from the private industry, from contractors like us. So the first is APFIT. And you see a very large dollar amount there, $10 to $50 million of funding. And these are traditionally equity-free funds that we can apply for. Now, I take that back. Only government organizations can submit your proposal. So you do have to have an advocate or a coach on the inside that can totally understand why your product or service is innovative that can help the DoD. So, there are times when this program opens and it just opened up. So look at AppFit. They are seeking sort of non-traditional methods on buying defense technology. They are looking for small businesses. They're looking for startups that got something very unique to offer. So again, a lot of money, a really great program to look closely at. The next one is the SBIR, STTR. Now, there are other departments and agencies that have similar programs like SBIR. It's an SBA backed type program, but the DoD one is really great. I mean, again, these are equity-free funding opportunities for small business. And, I've started a few small businesses, and we know, you don't want to give away equity. You don't know what you have yet. So this is a great opportunity to come in, help the DoD will help you commercialize what you've got. And they've got 14 what they're calling critical technology areas. I'm sure if you look at them, they're not going to be foreign to you. I mean, we are talking about things like artificial intelligence. We're talking about biotech, energy, microelectronics, advanced materials. Those are some of those categories. But if you've got one that slips a little bit into some of those 14 areas, it's a great opportunity to get in there and to create again a relationship and help commercialize and get to market. So new DoD like specific areas and topics, they're called broad agency announcements. They are released the first Wednesday of every month. So last Wednesday, there was one that was released. So, I've got the link in here. You can bookmark it. You can check it out just to see if you've got an opportunity there. And again, it's a good chance. Just another line in the water. We need lines in the water as contractors. And the last one I'm going to highlight is the Army xTECH program. This started about 2018. And if any of us have seen Shark Tank on ABC, it's a very, very similar to Shark Tank. There's no cameras, but it's a pitch competition sometimes. I was at the CES show in Vegas in January, and xTECH was there, and they're trying to pull in innovative technology for the Army. And the pitch was actually at the event. I saw last week they're in Tampa, Florida at a Special Operation Forces show. So the pitches are done at the event, the awards are done at the event. They've got a booth. They are working hard to find those types of companies. So again, they're looking for small to medium-sized businesses generally, and their definition loosely is 1,500 employees. I mean, it's not a small business, really, but that's a big, capable company. Um, you see $20 million in cash prizes so far, 90 millions in contract awards to date. What I want to stress here is that this is not necessarily about the money. This is about the opportunity. This is the longer game. The benefits are really largely on the educational side, the mentorship with the Army. You've got mentorship with certain stakeholders that are involved. You get exposure. You get community building with a program like this. I mean, we are all supporting the DoD mission of defending this country and what they do. So again, it's a community, and they are constantly running new subjects and topics for xTECH. They are not going away. If anything, this is just going to get more robust. So check out the link. You might see them at a show. Don't pass them up. Get to know what they're doing and seeing if there's a fit there. Okay, so here at Winvale, we have a lot of clients who have questions around small business set aside. So, we saw the DEI issue come out where they have sort of taken that off the table in the world of the government. DEI is a workforce equity type program that deals with discrimination. And there are a lot of my clients who are saying, are they going to now take off veteran-owned small business? Are they going to go to women-owned next? What's going to happen next? And what I want everybody to know, there's a couple different things here happening. One is the Small Business Act, which is the foundation of the set-aside program. That is a law. And Congress and only the federal courts can eliminate it if they're found unconstitutional. President Trump and administrations that come can't do anything to repeal the Small Business Act and set aside. In fact, we deal a lot with people on the Hill. I'm sure you guys do. There's a saying right now that past month or so, the saying is, if the president makes a public declaration, Congress destroys it. There's been a sort of a shift a little bit in momentum where Congress is now sort of digging in, and they're acting more independent, and they're less willing to follow Trump's lead in policies. So that's the first thing that I want to talk about. The second thing is, again, we don't have evidence yet that Trump is trying to do anything to the Small Business Set Aside program, but could he influence it? We saw the SBA, they had a small disadvantaged business goal of 60%. If set aside, the SBA will negotiate the goals for every department and agency in those various set aside buckets every year. SBA's was, for SDBs was 60%. OPM's was 36% for small disadvantaged. Now, for 2025, it's 5%. So you can see a little influence on some programs. There's not seismic changes like that often, but we are starting to see a little bit of influence on the government wanting maybe the right solution and not having to spend as much money to find small business set aside. So there's a little influence there. So my takeaway here is know the agency, know their current buying behavior, know their small business goals before you start incorporating that as your brand, start marketing your set aside. When you go out and recruit teaming partners, we all need to have a few horses in the stable, right? We have to have a women owned over here. That's really great. We have a disadvantaged business, a small service disabled veteran owned business. We all need those. I don't think that's going to change, but just make sure what kind of buying environment you're sort of selling into now. Because again, the executive branch may make some additional changes next year. I just want to make sure we're all kind of keeping up on that. All right, so that's my last slide. I will turn it back over to Karl, and he's going to finish it up with NATO and Europe.
Thanks, Brian. Really informative stuff. I just want to remind everyone that the Q&A board is open. So if you have questions, I'm the last 3 slides here. We're about to get to Q&A. So fill up that Q&A board, and let's give Brian a lot of questions. These cover a lot of really good stuff so far. But on to my slides here, and the beef of what I've been doing for the last couple months and been doing deep dives in with Winvale on is European defense and NATO spending, and that's defense with a C. I fully embrace myself in the European concept there, and it's defense with a C for sure. Next slide, please. So European defense spending, if there's a couple points, I had this slide jam-packed with such really important information, but there's a couple really big points off this slide that I want to bring to everyone's attention. Brian, in many of his slides and many of the topics in the federal market right now in the United States is very United States centric. And the mood has been kind of sour, to be quite honest, as a small business owner myself. A lot of people are scared. A lot of people are seeing recession. A lot of people are seeing loss of possible dollars coming into the market. However, if you just pivot just a little bit and go across the Atlantic Ocean to the European defense market, just in one country alone, $1 trillion is starting to be opened up into the defense industry market. A lot of you saw the US headlines, and that kind of downplayed it because it got lost in our news cycle. Those headlines read that Germany had a $500 billion increase in defense spending. Well, the real answer is when you go read to the German news and you listen to and go to Germany and see what they're talking about, it's actually $1 trillion. And it's followed up with a quote by the political leadership that, or whatever it takes. So when a government tells me that it's traditionally been underspending within NATO, that they're now investing $1 trillion, and also followed up with, or whatever it takes, it kind of piques my interest. I know as many have been critical of the German government and other NATO countries. I just put that second bullet in there as a reminder that these countries are constitutionally bound oftentimes not to be able to increase their defense spending like they do in the United States, where we have a yearly defense budget approved by our Congress. These countries, particularly Germany, they actually have to have constitutional changes to the amount of money they spend. So when these changes do happen, it's kind of monumental. Germany just did one that I just talked about. Overall, NATO's commitment, Germany going up to 2% is a really big deal. It's the largest increase since the fall of the Cold War that Germany's had, and just 28% in 2023. 2 big initiatives that I see as absolute gold mines for those who are maybe downtrodden a little bit in the US federal market is, we've heard about Trump talking about he wants an Iron Dome for the United States. Well, the EU is doing exactly the same thing. That is a very niche market, in a sense, but it has a large outreach of assets and possibilities and contracts that they need to pull from that could be useful for, contractors in the United States to pivot to in the EU. And it's not just, projects like ESSI that's on the slide here. We're talking about solutions for Ukraine as well. And they're not all military. When we've talked, Trump in the news recently about, U.S. Relationship with Ukraine in reference to natural resources, rare earth minerals, those are also guaranteed to EU agencies as well, in that those solutions, that industrial-based solutions, the rebuilding of Ukraine post-war, think of how Germany was devastated after World War II. Ukraine is devastated right now. There are huge opportunities that are now being carved out, and the EU is preparing to go into Ukraine and assist Ukraine in rebuilding after the war. So while we may be feeling a little bit downtrodden here in the United States, massive opportunity within European defense with a C. Now, Karl, how do you get to that? Okay, first of all, before I go to my next slide, you do have the opportunity through the United States, the GSA schedule, which Brian's been talking about, to actually go to NATO countries and have NATO countries procure through the GSA schedule. I'm not going to hone in on that today. I just want to give you a brief example of how to go direct to NATO. But there's a great article on Winvale's website. If you go to their website, they will show you how to do that, getting to NATO countries via the GSA schedule, because they can buy off of the GSA schedule. So NATO international competitive bidding, you got to get your foot in the door. And it's a the system is not very much unlike the US system, but it has its complexities, of which I'm trying to dive deep into right now. But the first thing you got to do is get with the Bureau of Industry and Security for your pre-approval from the United States to go to NATO. And that gets you your golden ticket to get into the door with NATO. And it gets you on the list of companies that can do business within NATO. There are 4 main companies or main entities within NATO right now that I've got my eyes on. Next slide, please. That require self-registration. But once you get that initial BIS certification to go do business with NATO, you can see right here in the descriptions of these entities, of the entities you might be dealing with. Let's say you're in weapon systems, or you want to, help, large procurement for building up their military bases in Poland, catering services, port services, all your services, even your medical supplies, your weapon systems. You're probably going to be talking to NSPA, the NATO Support and Procurement Agency. This is a rather large one. It's kind of almost like a catch-all on here. You can self-register there. You can walk through the site. And as a note, all of these agencies, they do have on their websites ways to self-register, and they also have help menus that can help you get into their websites and through their self-registration portals. NCIA, this is a big one. We have a lot of cyber IT. It's a big rage in government contracting, has been for quite some time. Can't seem to shake a resume or a help wanted sign without these capabilities. Same thing in Europe. They need these capabilities. NCIA would be your go-to portal for that. Now, crisis response, that's going to be SHAPE. And they're going to handle crisis response. They have a separate portal as well. Now, bear in mind what I told you about in the very beginning. They're already planning and making plans within SHAPE through the NSPA and NCIA on how they will rebuild. So just don't think of like, oh, well, I'll wait till cessation of hostilities. You probably want to start moving now and developing ways to get into the European market, because it's not always going to be a crisis response. These are going to be planned actions. So you can't just wait for the emergency to happen and go. So don't always just rely on going straight to SHAPE. And the last one here is kind of local. I know most of us here, we're JMU alumni, so we're kind of home in Virginia. This one's actually in Norfolk, NATO Supreme Allied Commander Transformation. They're right down in Norfolk. They have an office down in Norfolk. They also have ways you can get in touch with them through their websites. And they're co-located with the U.S. Joint Forces Command, Norfolk, Virginia. A lot of fleet support down there, a lot of your naval facility support. When ships roll in, they can, if they're NATO vessels, they're going to be, or if they're going to a NATO port, this is the coordination point for them. So with all that said, there are ways to get into the NATO and the EU market. Like it may feel like we have a downturn in the U.S. market. I think it's coming back up, just like Brian probably also agrees with me. But another way to look at it is look abroad. It's not that difficult, especially when you have experts like Winvale to help you out. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that here in a second. And I see the questions and answer board is coming alive here pretty good. And we're kind of getting on time here. So I'm going to move on. I'm going to open it up to the Q&A section. And let's see here. First question is, Brian, if you want to take this one, it's if we wanted to add a SIN to our GSA schedule, how long is the modification taking right now?
Yeah, I think I covered that on my earlier slide. Modifications are taking a lot longer than expected. So a process that might take a month is taking 2 to 3. Again, we don't want to find an opportunity in September and then try to amend our GSA price list in time before fiscal year end. Changes, you have to get ahead of those. So yeah, three months probably right now to expect.
Excellent. And Brian, I'm going to take the next one. It says, anonymous attendee, generally speaking, would NATO purchase more through their own programs or via the GSA schedule or other domestically operated vehicle? What's a good source to look at these numbers? So that's actually a complicated question, because if you're a European entity, you have the GSA schedule to apply for, but you also have NATO, and you also have each nation has its own acquisitions process to go through. Obviously, it's going to be a tough question to answer because there's trade agreements, there's trade balance agreements, there's even this wild card called tariffs that's out there right now, and I wouldn't put my a professional guess, let's say, on that one, because it would really depend on the nation, analyzing the tariffs on that nation, what kind of trade imbalances they have, as to what would be beneficial for them to go to. That might be a case where you look at maybe opening an entity in that nation. If it's a high tariff nation, and they're maybe pulling from their domestic resources more. If it's a nation without as much of a trade deficit, they may be more free to negotiate, goods flowing in from outside, say from the USA into Europe or to their nation. So it's really a dependent which nation you're talking about type question. But it's a great question, and it's really a calculus answer. I hope I answered it the best I could. Next one, I think it's a JMU question here before you. I'm going to pitch this one off to you, Brian. Let's see here. Here you go, Brian. This one's a good for you as for everyone that knows. Brian and I actually went to school together. We are actually both 98 grads from JMU. It says, can you speak further to how JMU has prepared you in the government space and what JMU can do more of in the future to nurture collaboration with federal entities?
Well, Karl, I think you and I both share our undergrad degree in history, which is a great degree as a jumping off point to what you want to do in business. But we certainly learned how to research issues and write out issues. The U.S. government and politics kind of shares a little bit of that space. I know JMU has a great study abroad program downtown. We used to have a number of interns in the summer that would work with us. Spend some time as they go through that program. I'm really loving seeing JMU do more, stretching their legs. We're only 2 hours from the DC area, and most of us, myself included, our first job, we left Harrisonburg and went to where the jobs were, which was in Northern Virginia and DC and Maryland. So, there's really nothing more than I can be an advocate for. Also for LinkedIn. Connecting with people who are in the GovCon space, JMU alum. I think JMU's got the best alumni network. Everybody seems to be so gracious with their time and mentoring the young people as they're coming along and helping them understand the best path forward. And certainly the JMU Federal Dukes here, this is one of the small kind of best kept secrets for us in the GovCon space. A great way to connect the alumni and what JMU is doing to our profession. And I'd love to see that continue to get more popular and more traction, and for us to have more resources, more happy hours. I mean, it's happy hour is a great way to connect with people and help kind of navigate your career path.
Thanks, Brian. I think this one's a really good one for you as well, Brian, with Winvale's talent. It says, how can I partner with existing GSA contractors for upcoming opportunities without having my own schedule?
That's a good question. So it really it starts to divide the crowd. Is it a product or is it a service? If it's a service, you can always find GSA contractors on the GSA website that have your capabilities. So you can find companies that are qualified, who have labor categories under IT or engineering or business consulting. Reach out to them. Obviously, you need to understand your value prop and what your rates are. They're looking to mark up that sub relationship. I don't know if it's 10% or so. So, have that sort of framed out for them. And obviously, if you have a niche rather than a vague specialty, a lot of companies are looking for that. So if you are specializing in a certain cybersecurity or .NET deployment, something brand new, people are looking to find you. So going through the GSA website and seeing the contact information and just picking up the phone and sending an email, a great way there. If it's products, Winvale, we have our own GSA contract. We have a couple other big contracts that we have, and we work with people who don't want to have their own direct federal contract. That may come with paperwork and all the acronyms they're not comfortable with. So you can effectively find a company like us or any sort of reseller and work with them through what's called a letter of supply, and you're reselling your product through them. And that could be SaaS. It doesn't have to be, laptops or pens and papers. I mean, there's SaaS deployments and other sort of innovative subscription type platforms. So again, a letter of supply and a partnership through a reseller kind of gets your foot in the door that way. You're giving up a little bit of margin, but you are reaching that customer, because we all know when you get to the end of that relationship with that customer, that pitch, and the government wants to buy, what's that next question? What contract can I use? How do I reach you? It's about the contract. So we want to make sure we have a contract strategy that aligns to our business strategy. They have to be one and the same. So answer the contract question for yourself early and make sure we have those when we know who we're actually selling to.
Thanks, Brian. I got one that I'm going to quick answer, and then if you want to take a swag at it too, Brian, since you've been a very successful starter of a couple businesses, more than a couple businesses, how would you recommend getting into your first contract if you've traditionally worked as an employee, especially in this market? How would you make that pivot? As a small business owner myself, I think making the pivot is all about networking. It's about alumni associations like the JMU Federal Dukes, and it's about talking to great organizations like Winvale. You find organizations that support maybe your set aside. Winvale's got a great, history of track record of working with SDVOSBs, something that I've caught up on. And also, my last piece in there would be try not to do it alone. Get a partner. When you get a partner and you build a team ahead of time, you can build your work experience and make your company's pitch, your capability statement more powerful to try to win that first contract. And making the pivot is difficult because you're going to go from, a financial security blanket of having that employee paycheck as a W-2 employee to going out there and eating what you kill. And it's a financial pivot that needs to be a family decision, and as a team decision. And finding the right partner and trusting that partner is very important to a startup LLC. Brian, do you have anything else? I mean, you're a successful businessman yourself.
Yeah, I've got a few comments, and I'm assuming that the employee reference meant they were a current or former government employee, and they're moving from public to private. When that is the case, you are moving with relationships. You used to work with great people. You're supporting great programs and missions. In the government, it's always the most difficult is finding that first contract so you can get past performance and you can understand things a little bit better. So, my my recommendation is to go back to that agency, look for ways to support what they have, understand their budget, understand their pipeline of procurements. You can also use there's some great public websites. usaspending.gov could be one. You can see the current contractors that that agency or department works with. You can see what contracts, what kind of dollars. You can see the recompetes. Or for you, you can be a sub to that prime contractor who's either currently under a POP contract or it's a recompete. You've got maybe certain technical experience that you can play into. So, that's, I think for us, we love hiring veterans here. We work a lot with the DoD, and veterans just have a certain camaraderie with other military members, and there's just no way around that. So, that I think it's a very unique value prop for somebody, and that's kind of where let's go to first.
Thanks, Brian. I think we got time for one more question. It says, can you provide some further clarity on what is meant by tiered contracts? Reference the changes to BIC, GWACs, and GSA.
Mm-hmm. I'll take that. Yeah. So there are certain contracts where the government is evaluating more information. They are looking at financials. They are looking at past performance. They are looking at a price that they negotiate more aggressively than other contracts. You know, there are various levels of contracts and those requirements. If you see an RFP that it's only 10 pages big, that's not going to be a BIC contract. You know, those BIC contracts are open for only a certain period. You know, like the NASA SOUP 5, that's currently on the table. That was a 10-year award. NASA SOUP 6, the submission's already happened, but that's a BIC contract. What will happen with NASA SOUP? I don't know, but you know, if you can get as a prime relationship, get on that as an awarded contractor, or establish a relationship with a contractor who has one or a few of these BIC contracts. Again, just reading the tea leaves, my sense is that the buying environment, there's going to be a lot more political pressure to use these larger established, let's see, tier 2 and tier 3 contracts in the government. Because I think, you know, there's going to be a fair amount of auditing happening in the years ahead. I think people are going to go behind the contracting officer's work. Why did you make this determination? Why did you make this award? Why didn't you look at other programs that maybe have more of an established customer base or contractor base with the dollars allocated to that? So again, that needs to be part of your contract strategy, is to align yourself with tier 2, tier 3 contracts. And you know, you can go to OMB and you can see examples of what that would be.
All right, Brian, I'm going to throw one fastball at you, one last one before we go to our thank yous
Okay.
and throw up our contact information. Why the big shift for the USG to buy from GSA? Ease of acquisition? Question. Can you repeat the anticipated spend again?
Well, again, I think, you know, in my slides, we talked about why GSA. Well, their mission in part is acquisition. You know, NASA's mission is is to go to the moon. It is not to administer SOUP 6. And, you know, a lot of politicians understand that makes a lot of sense to them. Let's keep that area of specialty with GSA. So they're moving things, it'll be slow, I think, but there's going to be a direct movement, intentional movement back to GSA. So, um, the current GSA schedule spend last year was $51 billion. The current expectation that GSA as an agency administering all the BIC tier 2, tier 3 contracts, you know, can get upwards of $450 billion. That's a lot of money going through that agency. So, you know, that's right now, you're going to want to get more familiar with GSA, more familiar with their contracts. More is going to come to GSA than leave. I don't see that happening at all. So finding yourself, you know, the relationships, the companies, and getting these contracts checked off and getting them in, they're going to take a while. A new GSA schedule offer, like I said, that usually took us 6 months. It's now going to take us 18 months. I mean, that might be an average, but GSA is telling us directly, look, you know, this is going to take 2 to 3 times longer now because I've got less people. People took the early retirement buyout, and they're trying to recruit like crazy from within the government, COs to come over and help with the workload. So again, just a culture change, a sea change on how government procurement is going to happen going forward.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brian. And with that, we have 1 minute left before we have our hard stop and get people back from their lunch breaks to their work desks. I want to just move on to the next slide here and say thank you very much, Brian, and the Winvale team. This has been an incredibly informal webinar, informational webinar. I wish that we could have gotten to everyone's Q&As today. I know Brian does too. We hate to go, but here's our emails. If something interested you, by all means, email us, especially the Winvale team, Brian Dunn and his team, great team to work with. They can lead you into a lot of these contracts. They're a great company. I appreciate working with you guys. And right,
Karl,
one more word, please.
I was going to say, and connect with us on LinkedIn. Come on, Dukes. Lean on your network.
Yeah, absolutely. Not just JMU Federal Dukes, but lean on Winville's network too. That they're a great tag team. Hit me up on my last couple slides here, just so everyone can see. As these last 2 slides are flashing in front of you for about 30 seconds each. Just a reminder, this is recorded. So if you want to go back and go, this will be posted on the JMU Federal Dukes LinkedIn page, as well as our other social medias. And next slide, please. And that way you can go back and see the slides again. You can see what we've said again. And by all means, get to our contact slide and email us with further questions. I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks again, Brian and the Winvale team. It's great to have you working with us today. You all hope you have a good day. Go Dukes.